kind of country is this? When did you know that our police officers could be instructed to arrest you, your son or your neighbor with no evidence because somebody who is as yet unidentified has told them to arrest and therefore incarcerate persons for 4 months? As if those persons have no rights. And while these are the facts, the Attorney General is saying they will not get 1 cent of compensation because I will use the strength of the state to fight them to the bitter end. That is the Attorney General's position. And then there was an assassination plot. The Prime Minister addressed the nation and the world and told the world that she has credible information that her life was being threatened and that there's a group that is out to assassinate her. She called me in my office to be impressed by this cock and bull story, to take part in it, and I refused. And I said to her, the only thing I would do, if you are so minded as head of the National Security Council, I would want to hear from somebody in the police service who you authorize to tell me what you are dealing with. She sent Deputy Commissioner Richardson, and I spoke to him for 5 minutes. And in 5.5 minutes, I knew that they were talking foolishness. And I told the country that the same day. But in the meantime, it became clear that when the Prime Minister addressed the nation and mobilized the army in defense of some assassination plot, she knew that the plot had been discredited by the police. The documents that the police prepared and presented on assessing this so-called assassination plot had come to the conclusion that there was no plot. That didn't prevent the Prime Minister from addressing the nation and telling the world that 16 Muslim men is trying to assassinate a Hindu Prime Minister in Trinidad and Tobago. And those people stayed in office, having been arrested for attempted assassination of the Prime Minister. They were picked up under the powers of the state of emergency. But when the emergency ended, there was not a shred of evidence against one of them to be held under any other law because they were held under the emergency powers of the state of emergency. So therefore, when the emergency ended, the incarceration ended, and as far as Kamala was concerned, as far as Annan was concerned, they could go to hell. These are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I don't care who they are. I don't care what their religious persuasion is. I don't care what their age is. That is wrong, and that's a stain on this country. But that was how the corn grew. And then, after all that practice, we come to perfection. I must say tonight, I am very pleased and proud of my 2 colleagues, Senator Faris Al-Rawi and Mr. Colum Imber, who have come here tonight and in simple, straightforward English have explained to the people of Trinidad and Tobago gathered here in 5 Rivers, and those listening at home, and those who will hear when we rebroadcast this meeting. Mr. Imbert made a very important point to the people of Trinidad and Tobago tonight. He said we have in office a Prime Minister who knew the portfolio of one of our ministers, Herbert VOLNEY. Let me read for you what pieces of legislation VOLNEY had responsibility for. Mr. Imbert told you he had criminal justice and it was taken away a year ago. Let me tell you what he was left with. Legislation. Criminal legislation. That was taken away. Listen what he was left with. The Criminal Injuries Compensation Act, the Justice Protection Act, the DNA Act, the Community Services Orders Act, and the Police Complaint Authority. That is what Honorable Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa created a portfolio to give Volney as Minister of Justice. So when I tell you that Volney came into this government with an agenda and an ulterior motive, and the Prime Minister knew about it, think about that. Think about that. And he before that he had criminal justice legislation which he saw fit to take away. And you may recall for the first year of Volney's existence as a minister, we were asking in this country, what does Volney do for his day's work? But with a portfolio like that, you have to have a microscope to see what he does. But he knew, and his colleagues knew, and the Prime Minister knew what he was working on. And the Ministry of Justice was no accidental ministry. And what has happened under Clause 34 was no error. It was a conspiracy. And we at the PNM will not be duped by any foolish talk from any quarter about the Parliament failed. Yes, we can take issue with whether or not Clause 34 should have been a part of the bill. But that requires a separate discussion. But having given the Parliament an assurance that 3 to 4 years will pass before any law of this nature comes into being, what then happened in the intervening period to cause you to want to bring it on board on January 2013? And even as you do that, you have to pull out Clause 34 and bring that into effect in August of 2012. And you see, we were told that Volney was fired for lying to the cabinet. But if a person tells a lie, it is not because they want to hear the sound of their voice. There has to be a motive behind telling the lie. Because they always had an option to tell the truth. And the fact that they told a lie, one that can get you fired and disgraced, means that there was a motive. And as we are gathered here tonight in Five Rivers Junction, or listening in the comfort of your home, we have not yet got an answer from the Prime Minister what was the motive for Volney's lying to the cabinet. And even though you proclaim Clause 34, you talk all kind of story, but you have not told us yet what was the reason, the truthful reason for proclaiming Clause 34. But tonight on a PNM platform you would have heard that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, I'm told that she was the brightest person in our law school class. I wouldn't doubt that. I was told that she was an outstanding lawyer. I was told that she merits senior counsel. But this senior counsel with prime ministerial responsibility sat in a cabinet, saw a minister who does not have portfolio for a bill so important that it cannot be passed by a simple majority. It has to be passed by a special majority. The government has a special majority in the lower house. Don't let them fool you. They didn't need opposition votes. 3/5 majority in the lower house is 26. They have 29. So when the Prime Minister said if the opposition didn't vote for it, it couldn't pass, that is a... But in the upper house, in the Senate, they had to get independent votes if the opposition didn't support it, to get the 3/5. But look at this scenario where the Prime Minister sits in a cabinet and has a minister who does not have portfolio for that piece of legislation, bring cabinet notes about it, bring it through the parliament, interface with other organs of the state, including the Chief Justice, the Director of Public Prosecution, the Criminal Bar, and the Law Association. The man was an imposter and the Prime Minister didn't know that. And he came to the Parliament and he stood up behind the Prime Minister and he presented the bill, and the bill was passed in the lower house. And the lower house saw to it that the bill said, if for 10 years they can't start your trial after you've been charged, then we agree that you should be able to make an application to the court and have the matter thrown up on the condition. And of course, we went home. The next time the government, because I'm saying government here, because we are rejecting out of hand this notion that they want to sell us that VOLNEY was a rogue minister and VOLNEY acted on his own, for which he was punished, and therefore we should move on. VOLNEY did not and could not act on his own to get this done. So when VOLNEY went to the upper house to get the bill, the act passed in the Senate, he had the position of the lower house, which was 10 years since you have been charged. But by the time VOLNEY started to present the government's position to the upper house, he was able to tell the upper house, it is 10 years since you commit the offense. The amnesty improved. And we asked the Prime Minister, and we're asking her again tonight, where did VOLNEY get that from? Who authorized that change? And until we get the answer to that, the truthful answer, those who have been